All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to this Crowdcast presentation. I'm so excited to have Carol Kranowitz here with us today from Maryland. If you are new to Crowdcast, your best chance of having a great experience is to be doing this through Google Chrome and not any other browser. Google Chrome is the best one for this presentation. If you are watching it and the screen slows down, you can click your arrow in your browser window and it refreshes. So sometimes now and again, depending on your computer and the speed of your internet, sometimes there'll be a drag or a lag. It's not really on our end. We both have, Carol and I have our high-speed internet going and we should be pretty good to go. What else? If you haven't taken the poll, please do. And if you could say hi in the chat room so that I know you are hearing us, that would be really wonderful. So those of you who are here, say hi. Yay. Hi, Jen. Hi, Katie. Hi, Rylan. Is it Rylan? Oh, wow. Look at me.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Mary.
We have 66 people online. That's the most we've ever had live. Yay. Yay. Oh, Ryan, pronounced Ryan. Great. All right, so everybody's hearing us, Carol. Everybody's ready.
Right, ready.
All right, so I am going to read Carol's introduction because it's a great one and I want to make sure I get it right. So Carol Kranowitz observed many children with sensory processing disorder and mild autism during her 25-year career as a preschool teacher. To help become more confident in their work and play, she studied sensory processing and sensory integration theory. She learned to help identify her young students' needs and to steer them into early intervention. Today, she speaks internationally about SPD's effect on children's learning and behavior and how families, teachers, therapists, and other professionals can support children as they grow. The first book in her award-winning Sync series, The Out-of-Sync Child, has sold 1 million copies. Yay! It was selected by Brainchild magazine as one of the top 10 books about children with disabilities. Carol's latest book is The Out-of-Sync Child Grows Up, Coping with Sensory Processing Disorder in the Adolescent and Young Adult Years. A graduate of Barnard College, Carol has a master's in education and human development from George Washington University. She is a board member of the Star Institute for Sensory Processing Disorder, and I put that in our chat, the link to that institute in our chat box. She lives in Maryland, plays the cello, and dotes on 5 sensational grandchildren. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much for having me, Deb. It's exciting.
This book I love. If you don't have this book, you need to go out. This is Carol's grandson's book, and it's called Absolutely No Dogs Allowed. He dedicates it to his granny. And they call you what? What's your nickname?
Granny Cranny.
And the dedication says, to my granny who helped me publish this book and to everyone who helps people achieve things. I love that dedication. That's what we all are. All of us on Crowdcast today, we're all people who help children achieve things. I think that's what we do. And this book, you can learn the alphabet through the book. And he also, your grandson's name is Asher. He also talks about feelings. And in the back, Carol, you have something where a little guide for teachers to talk about feelings. This is a great book. Love it.
And the senses. And he gets all the senses in there, including taste and interoception. Like the octopus tastes the fresh water in the park and it's not salt water and the octopus doesn't know what to do with herself.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book. I think it should be in every classroom for sure, and home. It's a great family read as well. I'm going to read it to Shalia tonight. She still loves being read to.
Oh, good.
I will read it to her tonight. She'll laugh. She'll giggle. She'll think it's very funny. All those different animals. So, Carol, I just want to talk about how you got started with this. I'm curious. Where did all this, your book come from? What was the inspiration behind your first book?
It is a curiosity, Deb, even to me. How did I get here? I had a typical childhood, had 2 typical little boys, started teaching preschool as a cold. I had not been trained as a teacher, but this was an independent school that didn't worry too much about teachers' credentials. So I started teaching, and found that it was quite delightful teaching most children. The school was also beginning to mainstream, that's what we called it in those days, mainstream or include children with identified special needs. And I found I related to them very easily and enjoyed making accommodations for these kids who came to the school in helmets and body long braces, and children with Down syndrome and children who were deaf, and all of those kids with all those needs fit right into my music and movement program. I've made it work for them. And then there were these other kids who were so out of sync. No identified difficulty, no physical anomaly that anyone could notice, and yet what was it about the basket of musical rhythm band instruments that was so disgusting to them that they would look at it and run and hide, or they would come toward it and tip it upside down and dump the triangles on the carpet and walk through the drums. And what about the kids who couldn't do simple art projects, or said, oh, I'm allergic to saltines, or my mother told me never to eat saltines? I'm thinking, this is different.
Yeah.
And I'd bring these kids home with me in my mind's eye, and I felt that perhaps I was not being a good teacher and wanted to be a better teacher. And I asked and asked and asked. And finally, after 10 years of teaching, an occupational therapist came to our school and gave us teachers a 90-minute workshop on what was then called sensory integration dysfunction. That we call it sensory processing disorder today. Same thing, but the new term makes more sense. And that little workshop absolutely clarified what I was seeing in these kids. She helped me see patterns. So, for instance, there was a child who had what we call tactile over-responsivity, but I didn't know. I just wondered, why can't he sit next to anybody at circle time? Why does he have to pick up a popsicle stick and paint with the finger paint with a popsicle stick instead of his finger? Why won't he eat saltines or applesauce? I mean, why would he have a meltdown over a saltine? Why would he not go barefoot on barefoot day? Why would he yank at his clothes and tug and pull at his socks and his tags? So along comes this OT and she says, here's some characteristics of tactile over-responsivity, and ticks off all the things that I'm seeing in this kid. So it was electrifying. I saw the patterns. I know nature loves patterns. And I said, give me more, give me more, give me more. So she was my mentor. And I said, what is there to read? Nothing. Ain't nothing for lay people.
Enter Carol.
Well, yeah. And I felt I was put on this earth to interpret this neurological problem so that teachers and parents who are not trained can understand what's going on with the kids that they love so much.
And that's what I love about the Out of Sync book. I have a loaner copy. It's always loaned out. I went to look for it on my bookshelf. It's loaned out again. And often people say to you, thank you for this book. It's changed my life. And I'm going to say to you, personally, as a parent of a child with sensory processing disorder, it's changed my life. And my set behind me was built by a young man, and he's starting to talk to me about his kindergartner and all these troubles he's having in school. And the wheels start turning. And I said, have you heard of something called sensory processing disorder? And he had not. run to my bookshelf, hand him your book, takes it home, reads it, speed up the story. His son's doing OT right now. He's in therapy for sensory processing disorder, and he's like a new little boy. So that is the impact your books had over and over and over again in the lives of children. So I know you're very modest about the impact, but that is what you've been put on this earth to do, and there's no doubt.
Yeah, yeah, and my goal before I die is to get pediatricians around the world to understand this too. This is not mommy's craziness, or this is a real physiologic issue that affects the child's sensory apparatus, especially in the sensations coming through his skin, through his inner ear, and through his muscles and joints. And when we can understand, oh, it's the body that's not processing these senses right, it makes everybody say, okay, well, we can handle this.
Right.
But doctors, you see, there's no medicine for it. Well, you know this, Deb. I don't know if our listeners all know this, but medicine doesn't fix it. What fixes or helps kids with SPD is the right kind of physical activities and physical situations. So it's taking away sensations that are bothering them, like you don't need to wear socks with seams because there are seamless socks.
And now there's t-shirts. It's really nice.
Right. You don't have to sit in a classroom on a chair that tips because the 4 feet don't hit the ground at the same time. There are solutions, and parents and teachers can do a lot of things. And then, of course, occupational therapists are magical with the treatments.
There are heroes with that. And we're having a nice chat in the chat box. People are saying that so thankful for your book and love Carol's book. So well done. OTs rock. I love it. OTs are wicked smart. That's true. Carol and I, we joke about we're both wannabe OTs, we do. So what we aren't, so we interpret. We interpret that information. I do it in my workshops. I'm not an expert in it. I just bring the awareness. And then once that awareness is there, it's up to the people in the workshops to decide how much they want to learn, how much they want to read, how much they want to understand about it. So let's, for those who may not be totally up to speed, what's the latest? How are we diagnosing SPD as far as the Dr. Lucy Miller's work?
How are we
Prompts that Dr. Lucy Miller has for sensory processing disorder. She kind of looks at it, puts these behaviors in baskets of
okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It breaks down to 6 types of sensory processing disorder. So some people call it sensory processing disorders. You can do that if you want to. So 3 of these types fall under a category called sensory modulation problems. And modulation is when things are too much or not enough, or, well, let me explain. Over a child who is who gets all the same sensations that we all get, because there's nothing distorted or damaged or ill about our sensory receptors. Everybody smells, everybody feels, but it's in the central nervous system that information gets garbled or connected in the wrong direction, or is processed late, or is processed too soon. All kinds of things can happen in the central nervous system. So I call the most common type, the person with the most common type is the sensory avoider. So all of you out there who are listening, think of your little boy or your Aunt Tilda who won't eat rice, okay? Or has a meltdown if they go into a department store and the lights are buzzing overhead, or walking on sand, or a backfiring truck. So, life happens. And for the sensory avoider, life is too much. All of these sensory messages that come into the eye, ear, nose, mouth, skin, inner ear, muscles and joints, can be way too much. Now, some people can specialize. They can be a sensory avoider in the touch or tactile system, or they can be generalists, and they can be over responsive in all 8 sensory systems. There's a lot of mixing and matching. So that's the most common. And we all are over responders when we have the flu, when we're very tired, when we're
at the airport, and they're on the mic
when we're at
constantly.
the airport.
Salt Lake City, Utah airport downstairs where they have all the, doors, and they're all overlapping, talking to each other, and I'm like, yes.
Right. And Deb, I know you and Shalia feel that Disneyland is a quite overwhelming place too. Yeah. Sorry. So sensory avoiders, as children, struggle to participate in preschool, which is messy, and there are lots of kids and high expectations for a child who needs everything orderly and predictable. A child who's a sensory avoider will grow up and continue to be a sensory avoider, but things might get better because the kid, even if unrecognized as having this problem, the kid might figure out, I'm not going to Disneyland. I'm not going to bake bread and get all that messy, sticky dough on my hands. I'm going to live my life in a way that suits me. Much better if we can get that child to an occupational therapist and have the central nervous system smoothed out. All right, but that's number 1, and I'm going to try to be quicker with the next 5. Another type is the sensory disregarder. This is the person who's under-responsive. So you need dynamite to get this kid to say, oh, there's a truck about to run me over. And this is the child we say, someone said, the sensory under-responder is the kid who always hears his middle name. John Franklin, how many times have I told you? Okay, yeah. John Franklin Jones. Well, he would pay attention if he could, but it takes a lot more intense sensory input to get him to awaken to what's going on. Once he is aroused, his nervous system is aroused, he might be Einstein. He has as many ideas as the next kid probably, but he needs to be intentionally awakened and gotten going. So, for instance, swinging can be a good way to get the under arouser going. And this is a child who tends to be kind of loose and floppy and not engaging in eye contact or conversation. I'm picturing him at preschool. So what a teacher can do is come over and say, John, come on, let's go to the swings. I'll help you get on a swing. And that might be just exactly what he wanted to do.
Right.
He's the non-self-starter. Okay, so swinging might be just great. A few minutes of swinging, he's kind of clicked in gear, and that might be all he needs. It's important to stick around because he might not know when it's time to get off the swing. But you might know this kid. This is Uncle Jerry, who never makes it down for Thanksgiving dinner because he's on his ham radio upstairs and just doesn't smell the turkey and doesn't hear the calls. All right, then we have the sensory craver. This craving is like an addiction for sensation. The craver might need a lot of touching. So he's picking up everything. He's coffee cups and pens and people, and he'll grab onto you, and he'll eat things or put things in his mouth well after the age of 2. 2 is kind of when kids stop mouthing to get information. The sensory craver can be 6 and still he's putting, cell phones in his mouth. I hope not. Spinning, lots and lots of spinning. Constantly bumping and crashing and on the move, constantly looking for input. And if there's not enough noise or commotion, he will make it to just keep the excitement going. Is this little 3-year-old, 8-year-old addict for sensation a potential addict as an adult? I am very curious about that, and I don't know that there has been any research, but it's possible that the people who become addicted to drugs or alcohol or smoking or something may have been these cravers who just needed more from the environment than they got naturally. Okay, those are 3 modulation problems. Over-responsivity causes the person to be an avoider. Under-responsivity brings out the disregarder. And craving makes a craver. Okay? And that's the person who's just not making, I guess, neurological judgments about how to respond to the sensations coming in. Then there's a different category. Modulation is one category. Then another one is discrimination. And the sensory discriminator, I call that the sensory jumbler. Discriminating among and between sensations is difficult. So is this faucet running really hot water or really cold water? Have I chewed that piece of steak sufficiently? Do I feel it in my mouth that I have chewed it sufficiently to swallow it? Is this button in the right buttonhole, or should the button go in that buttonhole? People with discrimination problems need a mirror to get dressed, because otherwise they don't feel the loops on their belts on their pants for the belts to go through. So they tend to look slovenly, and they tend to look messy. It happens also visually. So reading is very hard. Is it a D or a B on the page? It's oral. Did someone say fog or log? I remember one little boy in my music class, and forgive me, dear listeners, my anecdotes tend to be about little kids because I taught preschool for 25 years. So
We're good.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I held up a recorder, the musical instrument recorder. And I said, this is a recorder and, something bigger than this. And I said, some people call this a song flute. And I'm going to play a little tune for you. So I played a little tune. And then this little boy was just sitting there, and he waited for the tune to be done. And then he said, oh, Mrs. Kranowitz, I had Fruit Loops for breakfast. And I'm thinking, there he goes again on his own agenda. What the dickens is he talking about? But that I was beginning to get it more. When there would be something so way off base, I was beginning to be able to see what the conditions were that led children to behave in a way that was so out of sync. And I figured out a few minutes earlier, I had said, some people call this recorder a song flute. This little boy had auditory discrimination issues. He heard flute. He thought I said fruit. He told me he had Fruit Loops and felt like he was giving me something back in a conversation.
Oh.
How often we just miss the intent of the child, and we think, oh, he's dumb, or he's not paying attention, or so that's discrimination. Now, that little kid, he might have been fine with his tactile experiences. He might have liked glue and mud and had no problem with tags in his shirts. So you can have discrimination, sensory discrimination issues, and not have modulation issues. Or you can have both. There's a lot of mix and match. And then two more. Dyspraxia and postural disorder. They fall under a category called sensory-based motor disorder. So dyspraxia is, praxis is what we want. Praxis is, when Deb and I were, a few minutes ago, we were trying to get our screens together and synced and everything, and we were both a little dyspraxic. We were not pushing the right buttons because it's new for us and it's complicated, and we were both getting a little sweaty, but it's okay now. We're cool. We got it. And now we got it. And the next time we'll get it.
Right.
Praxis is getting it. It's working through the steps, thinking of what you want to do, doing the planning, and executing your plan. That's praxis. Dyspraxia is the opposite. You might have a great idea, but you can't plan it. Or you can plan it, but you can't execute it. So there are many ways that you can have dyspraxia. So finding your home room on the first day of school in the new high school. If you're dyspraxic, you're still back at your locker. You're not going to get there. Or applying to college, so many steps to that. Or making your first batch of brownies, so many steps to that. Putting on a seatbelt. This is something we all experience because it happens frequently. When you get into an Uber or a friend's car, and this is not the seatbelt that you have used before. And we have to go through many steps of pulling it out from the wall, and we never do it right. It comes skittering out, or we have to tug it harder, and then we grope around for the little gizmo. Lots and lots of sensory stuff going on in that operation, and we're dyspraxic. Imagine that in everything you do. And it's because your tactile system and your, I haven't talked about the vestibular system, that's in your inner ear, that's your sense of up and down and stability and instability and where you are in a swing. Are you moving forward, or is the bus next to you the one that's moving? All of that's in the vestibular system. And those are big problems for people with SPD. So you can have tactile issues, vestibular issues, and proprioceptive issues. That's understanding of your muscles and joints and where your body parts are and what they're doing. And all of those issues can make a person dyspraxic. And then finally, postural problems. This is person, I call this the sensory slumper, who, his head is so heavy, he can't even sit at the dining room table without holding his head up and doing her homework. Her head is on her arm like this as she's trying to write on the desk. These kids will sit in the W position. W is where you pretend my elbows are knees and your ankles are out like this, and your body's in the middle. So you have a W like that.
Yes.
That's very bad for knees and hips.
Very bad.
Yeah. And so why do kids do it? It's also uncomfortable for those of us who don't have to sit that way. Why do they do it? Well, because they're slumpers, and if they sit with their legs straight out in front of them or crossed in front of them like this, that's not enough of a base for them. They'll tip. A W position with the feet out wide makes a stabler base. So we really need to get our kids out of that position. Well, there it is in a nutshell here.
Thank you. Well, yeah, get everybody up to speed very quickly. I know it's a deep subject, and we can go as wide and deep as we'd like. And I wanted to kind of fast forward a little bit from preschool. Can we talk about these teens in your new book, The Allison Child Grows Up? And I just wanted to read some of the goals of the book that you had actually set forth some goals, and I think you did a really good job with it. I love that you invited people to share their stories, and then you put this together in a really cool way. So your purpose one was to give adolescents and adults looking back an opportunity to share their stories and voice their feelings about growing up with SPD, perhaps for the first time. Purpose 2, to help readers living with or living as an adolescent with SPD to validate their feelings and their experiences. And purpose 3, to give readers a sense of what the future may hold. Purpose 4, to offer specific coping strategies for SPD. And purpose 5, to increase public awareness about SPD. As a parent of a child with SPD who went through our typical high school, it's just a sense that they outgrow it, that this is just, you have to quit coddling. I heard these words from teachers. You have to quit coddling her. You got to let her go. You need to, and I'm open and I'm listening. But when she's in the lunchroom and somebody's having tuna fish sitting next to her, she will literally throw up. And I'm trying to keep that from happening because she would be mortified. Everybody around her would be mortified. And so when I talk to them about this and say, please set her next to some, make sure who's ever eating isn't eating anything like that next to her. Because she has a very strong, can easily throw up with cream on her arms, trying to shave her legs, anything like that, sunscreen, she has, and as she's gotten older, I'm able to say, Shalia, drink some water, Shalia, here, eat this crunchy food. I'm able to kind of sidestep her nervous system and calm it down a little.
Yes. And you have said that pretzels and crunchy food will help her.
Yeah, we lived off of that at Disneyland. I mean, Shalia doesn't say a whole lot, but in line at Disneyland, and I wrote this story for you in your book, was the Disneyland story, because it was so profound. She just looked up at me with these big eyes. She was totally stressed out, and she said, Mom, will this day ever end?
Oh, darling.
I always think of Disneyland as where everybody wants to go. So I was feeling kind of the same way, because I also have my issues. And so we just found as quiet a space as we could. We got our pretzels and we did our crunching to kind of calm ourselves down, took some deep breaths. Fortunately, we were there with a couple college students, friends of ours. So they took my son, who loved the stuff. They went on all the rides and they took off with him. And we were able to just kind of quiet our nervous system down. So I do think that writing this book for this particular group is really powerful. And I feel like it should be on every transition shelf, if, high school transition programs. I even feel like it wouldn't hurt to be on a list of reads, for the high school students to actually be able to read, because I'm with you about the whole drug thing, the anxiety. My son comes home, he's not in high school now, but last year he came home, he said, Mom, everybody's on anti-anxiety meds. All my friends. Either that or they're smoking pot every night to go to sleep, to wind down their nervous system. And it just makes me wonder, we haven't done studies. And I thought we need to do more studies. We're doing a lot of studies around anxiety and depression, but we need to link it to how much of this is sensory processing disorder that hasn't been diagnosed, and that they don't even, the adults don't even know about it. So they don't even know to ask or to explore it.
Yeah. And I just read in the Washington Post this morning a study talking about depression in teens escalating rapidly, and the connection in this research study was that these kids are using electronic devices so much. So that was that correlation there. So
Yes.
Add in SPD. So this is a child whose social skills might not be really, really cool. And it's so nice to talk to Siri or
Right.
Get your answers directly. It's easy, and then there are games that are pleasant, and you feel masterful and in control. It's so on top of the regular issues of adolescence, where everybody struggles. Who am I? What can I do in the world? And then you have the sensory stuff on top of it, and then you have this cop out of the I call it a cop out of the devices. Okay, so there are a million things to say, but here are a few things to say. To teachers, so that they understand the difference, we need parents to say, it isn't coddling, teacher, it's accommodating. And when I make an accommodation for my child, I'm helping everyone else in the classroom too. I'm helping you. You can help you, dear teacher, if you don't put my daughter next to the tuna fish eater. You're not going to make it happen. That putting her there more often is going to make her not throw up. This reminds me of a story. A little boy with sensory issues at the preschool where I taught. The preschool is called St. Columba's Nursery School in Washington. We made many accommodations for him, and it was great. And he did fine. And one of the things was he had a 5-pound bag of kidney beans in a pillowcase. His mom sewed it. He sat on it sometimes. He sat under it. He had it on his head. Yeah, sometimes when he was not wanting to listen to the story, he would go and tip it back and forth in his hands. I mean, he used it, but everything was within the parameters of okay behavior at preschool. And he did fine. Goes to kindergarten, the mother says to the teacher, my son will be coming with his lap buddy because it helps him so much. Oh no, she said. No, we don't treat anybody differently in the classroom. And the mom said, but he is different. Well, we're not going to point that out. We don't want to point that out. And so the teacher was motivated so beautifully to be good and kind and loving and inclusive. And the mom couldn't get through to her. This is different.
Yeah.
Okay. First week of school was hell. Mom asked again. No. Then mom went to the principal, and the principal interceded and said, let the mom send it in. Okay. So mother sends in the lap buddy on Monday. On Friday, the teacher called the mom and said, may I have 27 more? So
That's great.
Yeah, that was great.
That's what I talk about in my workshops. What's good for one is usually good for half or more of the class. And so when we say we're going to do it just for this one boy, or the one I really love, Carol, is needs a movement break. Like that's on their IEP, needs a movement break. I'm thinking, well, actually, Carol, right now I need a movement break. I've been sitting here for half an hour. I mean, we all need movement breaks.
Of course we do. Of course we do. Of course we do. I mean, an IEP probably has things for every child.
Yeah, they do.
So we just need to kind of steer the teachers and the educators to understand that we're not asking for something outrageous. We're asking maybe for an item to go to school, maybe more movement breaks, maybe every 10 minutes the kids can get out of their chairs and stretch their arms overhead. Okay, everybody at home, stretch your arms overhead. Okay, make circles in the sky.
For a half an hour, we're already,
Yeah.
there's so much out there already feeling your focus because we're in this internet cafe where we go boom, 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 boom. You know, we're used to we don't stay more than a minute on anything. So we're actually listening. It's been a half an hour, Carol. We've all been listening. So I think
okay, you're in my classroom. You're invited to wiggle and squiggle all you want
let's
to.
do this.
Okay, let's talk about grow.
One person asked if you could define interoceptive system.
Interoception. And are you paying attention to these wonderful questions over here?
These little cats as we go.
Oh, okay. All right. Because I have to put my glasses on and then change it. Okay. Interoception. Yes. Okay. We have 8 senses: visual, auditory, olfactory, that's smell, gustatory, taste, tactile, that's touch, and it's skin surfaces all over our body. So raindrops on hair is a wildly distressing tactile experience to some sensory avoiders. Clothing, the proximity of someone else, the possibility of proximity to somebody else can get a child anxious about a tactile experience. Okay, those are the 5 that we know about: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Then there are 3 more. The vestibular sense. The receptors are in the inner ear. And everyone just cock your head way over to one side. Okay, and now cock your head way over to the other side. Okay, now do.
It's because you moved a little bit. Move it slow.
What?
Yeah, you can't move very much on Crowdcast. It will. You need to sit still.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, what I was hoping was that we would try to find where center is with our eyes closed. You can do this later, folks. But move your head around with your eyes closed and then say, okay, now I'm going to stand up straight. And if you do, then your vestibular system is working well. But if you find that you open your eyes and you're crouched over or your head is tipped off to one side, that suggests your vestibular sense is not straight and true. Okay, the vestibular sense is our master sense. If we are uncertain about where our position is on Mother Earth, we are compromised. You know how when you have the flu or when you've been on a swing and you get off and you're dizzy, you know how disorienting and unpleasant that is? Imagine being dizzy all the time. That's why we have children clinging to the banister and to grown-ups and teenagers at school who walk down the corridor with their leading with their shoulder rubbing against the walls of the building. Just being on their 2 feet can be very disorienting and confusing. People with vestibular issues prefer sedentary activities. They like to sit. They don't like to dance. Circle games.
Well, and that kind of brings me to Go Noodle. A lot of people are talking about Go Noodle in the chat room. And one of the concerns I have with Go Noodle with the children with the sensory issues is it's so fast. A lot of the times it can create some anxiety around not being able to keep up Carol's video portion on the screen is black. How do I fix that? Oh, Jody, hit your up in, sorry, when you moved, it kind of throws Crowdcast off a little bit. There's a circle up in your, right by your browser, and you just click that arrow. If any of you, if that movement made your screen freeze or made things fuzzy, you just click that round arrow and it will refresh. So hopefully everything will be back to where it should be. But that's one of the things that when we're moving really fast, or children have to watch that, children with dyspraxia and some of the things you're talking about, that can create some anxiety because it's not predictable. They don't necessarily know what routine's coming next, and they haven't had that time to practice. So I think just something to be aware of when we're using Go Noodle with some of those students. Okay.
Right. Slow and easy is the way to introduce new activities with kids who are anxious about it. And never force a child to do a finger paint experience, for instance, if he doesn't like the paint. And never put him on a swing. And I learned that the wrong way. There was one little boy who didn't want to go across a board that I had set up in an obstacle course, and it was about 4 inches, it was on blocks at either end, about 4 inches off the grass. And he wouldn't do it. And I said, it's all right, I'll show you. And I picked him up, and that was a mistake. I terrified him. I wasn't enough security for him. People with vestibular over responsivity need their feet on the ground 100% of the time, not my feet.
Right.
So occupational therapists are trained to be able to help kids do that. And here's one thing they do, if you're not familiar with OT. Say there's a child whose feet never leave the ground, or even a teenager who is clumsy and throws up in the car and would never go to the amusement park in a million years, and clings to the banister going up and down stairs, and she's 16. Okay, that kid, I forgot where I was going.
About not having their feet off the ground, and they need to have their feet on the ground.
Oh yeah, OTs. Okay, what OTs do, and we can't do this in our homes or at schools usually. OTs will, they have a lot of hooks in their ceilings. From these hooks are suspended platforms and swings. And so an occupational therapist or OT might say to the child, sit on this platform, which is maybe an inch off the ground. And then there will be the slightest swaying, the slightest, and that is sufficient. And then the OT will build on that as the child's nervous system begins to say, okay, I'm not dying. I'm not falling off the face of the earth. It's very gradual. Incrementalism, it is something to remember too. And this is hard because parents, once they understand SPD, they want to do something right away. We need to take our time and do things gradually. So here's another example. If you have a picky eater at your house and you're determined that he's going to eat a string bean, the first week you have string beans on the table. And the second week you have one string bean on the edge of the child's plate. And the third week you ask the child to touch it. I mean, you don't have to have string beans every night, but I mean, it takes not just eat this, darn it.
My daughter will determine visually whether she'll eat something. She just looks at it. She picks it up, looks at it. I mean, if she even touches it, but it's a visual. She determines how it looks, whether she'll eat it or not.
Yeah, Deb, I'm glad you brought that up, because eating, it's not just taste. It's touch. It's how that string bean feels in the mouth. It's smell, of course. It's the feel of it, and the sight of it, and surely you have out there in crowdcast land. I know there are people who won't eat the mashed potatoes if the hamburger juice has crossed the
in
plate.
any way. Well, one of the stories I wrote for you in the book was about my poor dog who was so obese because my dad used to force me to eat everything, and I was the pickiest eater on the planet. We're talking spaghetti, no sauce. We're talking lettuce, no dressing. No, if I ate a hamburger, there's no mustard or relish. Just it drove my family crazy. And then so my dad would make me sit there, and then when he'd finally leave the table, my mother would just say, "Excuse me, I'm going to cuss here for a second," but this is how frustrated she'd get. She'd say, "Just feed it to the damn dog." And so our dog, our little dachshund, would be sitting under the table, and I would just be feeding her my food. It was so sad. I mean, I look back on it, it's kind of dog abuse, but at the time, we didn't know as much about dogs as we know now. But yeah, that poor dog was so overweight, and but just loved having dinner with us because got most of my dinner. Yep.
So your mom was making. I think that was an intelligent accommodation.
She's a very,
peace.
Woman that didn't cuss very much, but that's how much I pushed her with this whole finicky thing, and she could talk to my dad,
but she
and
understood
me, and
you. Yeah.
So more. We have, so we have vestibular, and then there's 2 more senses.
Okay. Yes. You see, once I get started, Deb. Okay. Vestibular. Okay, then there's proprioceptive. And the proprioceptive sense is all about our muscles and joints. And when we stretch our arms overhead, and I'm afraid to do anything because I don't
doesn't keep up. Crowdcast doesn't keep up with movement.
Yeah, okay. When we playing Simon Says is an example of proprioception, where someone will say, "Do this," and one hand will go on the shoulder, and then "Do this," and the other hand goes on the shoulder. Well, that can be very confusing. Or if the teacher says, "Put your hands in the air," and does not demonstrate it, if the child doesn't see it, he doesn't have the sensations in his muscles and joints to know how to put his hands in the air. So people with proprioceptive issues might stomp their feet as they walk. They're trying to be certain that they have a good connection to the earth. So they go stomp, stomp, or they'll drag their feet. And you say, "Pick up your feet." No, because if he picks up his feet, he's not there.
That feedback.
So he has to.
Yep.
He's the kid whose toothbrush is the first one to get down to the plastic because he rubs so hard. He's getting a lot
hard, dark, writing, breaking the pencils, and the teacher's like, "Quit breaking those pencils. I'm not trying to break them."
And he's not doing it. I mean, kids don't get out of bed every morning and say, "How am I going to press Miss Nelson's buttons this morning?" No, they want to get along in life. And what are they doing? They're trying to survive. So if they need to break pencils because that gives them a sense that they're present.
I just had somebody say, "Hey, my little brother is listening here." I used dam, like the dam of the river. That's the dam I used. It was DAM. Sorry about that. Anyway.
Okay, we'll keep it clean. Okay, the 8th sense is interoception. And the interoceptive sense is the sense, the unconscious awareness, if there is such a thing, of our internal organs. So how our heart rate is. And we all know if we're really thumping fast or if we're kind of sluggish. Hunger and thirst. When do we have to go to the bathroom? Interoception gives us that information. So we have kids who go to the bathroom a lot. They are overstimulated sensitive, over responsive to interoceptive messages. They're feeling it sooner than the rest of us would feel it. People who sweat. People with SPD tend to sweat more than people without SPD. And there's interoception at work again. And one of the reasons is SPD has as one of its sidekicks anxiety. So people are anxious because how are they going to deal with this sensory situation? And they're talking about life. And so it can be sweat making. Some children don't know when they're hungry, and they can be very cranky and falling to pieces, and they just aren't aware that all they need is some Cheerios or something. So interoception is very important. Interoception also tells us a lot about the situation we're in. And, when something's creepy, you'll feel, you literally feel the hair stand up on your neck, or you feel prickly, or you feel butterflies in your stomach, or your heart rate goes up. That's interoception. And we need to pay attention to that in ourselves and try to see it when it's happening to our kids. And furthermore, try to get our kids to recognize it themselves.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about old teenagers and young adults with SPD, we can do them a great service by reminding them that it's their sensory systems that might be affecting how they're responding to something. Like, so they might not know that it was that tuna fish sandwich that got them, their bodies all crazy. And so we sometimes we just need to say, oh, well, that was because you were sitting next to that.
I was a high school biology teacher, and I taught the health classes. And at the time, I didn't have Shalia, and I didn't know near what I know now about all of this. But I feel like part of my health courses, I would have done my students a great service to actually discuss SPD, to actually have them do some of your checklists in your book, and start exploring, because we all have our sensory system that we know what kind of revs it up. We know what we need to do. As adults, we know how to modulate that and take care of ourselves and take care of our sensory systems. And I feel like if we could teach our teens, and especially as they go off into college, and there's just this assumption around they know how to do this. They know how to take care of themselves. And I feel like their go-to right now is, go to the doc and get some medicine or for their anxiety. Where's that anxiety coming from? And really have them analyze that a little bit more and start feeling like, you mean if I wear like a little heavier or have a heavier blanket on my bed, that might make me sleep better, rather than necessarily have to smoke pot or something to get mellow, or to do whatever they're sometimes doing as teenagers, that whole, sense of self-medicating. I don't know. I feel like we're missing the boat a little bit. And I think that's part of this interview with you, is I'm wanting to, and your book, this book, everyone out there in Crowdcast, our Crowdcast community, I think this book really has to get out there. And people ask, on the call to action button, there's a link to purchase the book, and there's funds go right to SPD Foundation, the Star Foundation. So there are funds there for you. Part of the proceeds to the book, Carol donates to,
Star.
Okay, and then also Branson's book is available there too on Amazon. Somebody asked me earlier about that. So let's do this. Let's get all of you involved. Let's take a poll. If you haven't done the poll yet, and Carol, looks like we have some questions too, which if you think this is a good place to stop, we'll do the polls and questions.
Yeah, don't stop yet. I have one really good idea to share to everybody about helping the developing child own his SPD and
Okay.
know what to do about it. At every doorway, do a body check. And if we can get a child to just pause before rushing through a doorway, it's not just, do I have my boots and mittens? It's, do I have my backpack? Do I have my lunch?
I like
do
that.
I have?
That's a great tip.
Okay. And then,
I do that
am
myself.
I
Do I have my
bringing
keys?
But at every doorway, just pause. And in fact, while you're at the doorway, you might as well get a little deep pressure into your muscles and joints. And if your hands are free, press your hands really, really firmly on the door jambs, and press, or press your shoulders or your hips and get some input into your muscles and joints. Pause at the doorway, and boy, I mean, it's true for
every time you go to the doorway, you're kind of, am I present? My mind-body sensory connection, is it happening? Are we all put together here? Or what do we?
Right. Did I brush my teeth? Did I put my earrings in?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a little tip. But now let's go on
polls,
to the questions.
If you haven't answered the poll, you just click on this little tab that says polls. So somebody says, I do that with my son every morning, just to pause and say to him, are you ready? Do you feel set? Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So I asked a couple of questions, Carol. I asked, do you think children in our classrooms with SPD are adequately supported? Yes or no? And we had 3 yes votes. So that's great for those schools. They're doing a good job. And we have 74 no's. Do you think SPD is accurately diagnosed? We have 1 yes vote. We have 13 that it's overdiagnosed. And we have 59 underdiagnosed and seen as behavior issues.
60.
They're still voting.
Yeah.
You're still voting. Yeah. So, I find it okay. I'm watching, as a reading specialist, I'm watching the dyslexia energy going. Right now in our communities, the dyslexia parents are rising up, and they're getting all kinds of legislature passed about, we have to start at schools observing and not diagnosing, but screening for dyslexia. And I guess there's a part of me that feels like, where's our SPD movement? Like, where are we? Where's that movement in that crowd and that parents coming together to say, because I see a correlation between dyslexia, when you were talking about the different subtypes of dyslexia, I see some of that of sensory processing disorder. I see some of the subtypes also on dyslexia lists. So they cross in places. And so I'm feeling sometimes like everybody's now going to be diagnosed with dyslexia who might actually have SPD or underlying or comorbid SPD going on.
Excellent point. And there's a lot of misdiagnosis. ADHD is the biggie because the kids are fidgety and they can't pay attention, and those are hugely important criteria for ADHD. But why are they fidgety? It's because the tag in their shirt is driving them crazy. Or someone is scratching out an essay with a pencil, and pencils are affecting the child's auditory system. And inattention is because he's thinking about the pencil or the tag in his shirt. He cannot.
Yeah.
You can't volley a person out of SPD. So on a checklist, oh, this kid has ADHD because look, he's got this, he's got this, he's got this. And then so often children are misdiagnosed and misprescribed.
Yeah,
and
I see that there's what I call kaleidoscope. I see that they have some SPD, they have little of this, little executive functioning, a little, like this. It's like this whole kaleidoscope, and what we have to do is sort of ferret that out. And I think that's part of the assessments that we do. Why you bring them to an OT to do an assessment. So you bring them to the different experts in those fields. But what happens sometimes is parents bring them to the first person they bring them to. And if that first person is a doctor who specializes in ADHD, then they get the ADHD label, or if they stop there sometimes. And what I want to encourage parents listening is not to stop there. If you get that label,
right, or
something
a psychologist
that you're going to go, you want to get any child who's struggling, I just feel like get a sensory evaluation, because it's usually underlying to some degree, some children more than others. But I think it's just a good idea. I mean, I'm a fan of OTs and getting that sensory evaluation, so I know where that sensory system, how I'm dealing with this child daily on, sensory wise. I think it's just important information for us. Somebody asked the question, we'll get to questions, but they asked it in the chat box, so before it goes away and I can't see it anymore, and if you have a question, please ask it where it says ask a question, because that way we can see them there. But I don't always catch it in the chat box. You guys are chatting a lot and it goes pretty fast. But somebody asked, how do we differentiate between SPD and autism spectrum? Like, is there a key? I know that's kind of a technical question, but when do we know, or is it that sometimes it's a little bit of both?
Well, many of you know the name of Temple Grandin. She's the spokesperson for autism. And I asked her directly, does everybody with autism have SPD? And she said, yes, 100%. She said sensory issues are the biggest problem on a day-to-day basis for people with autism. Does everyone with SPD have autism? Of course not. I have SPD if I am no, I don't have SPD, but I have issues with gookie hands. I can't stand gookie hands. And so I would never be an art teacher, for instance, and I will never make bread again. I did it once. Okay, so I can live my life without baking bread. But I don't have SPD. So within the big circle of autism, you're going to have SPD. I don't know. I don't know how to do sets and subsets. But if you have autism, you have SPD. If you have SPD, you do not necessarily have autism.
Yes, and there's specific assessments we use to determine whether a child actually has SPD. And so where some people said, well, it's overdiagnosed, it could be that the child isn't actually getting to the right person to actually be looked at to see if that's actually the label. Like we have the sensory processing measure and sensory profile, and Dr. Miller has her assessment. I mean, there's a lot of different ones, and I'll be talking about sensory processing measure in 2 months with Diana Henry. But
good.
So there are specific ways. Unlike dyslexia, there isn't a specific assessment that's gone through the research ritual of actually saying that this is a good, valid tool. So with dyslexia, you have to use many tools. And so we're getting a lot of questions, and we're at almost 70 minutes, Carol. So
I'm still here.
Still here.
This is my still topic.
It's going longer, but I told Carol if it went longer and there was interest that we would go longer. So hopefully you are all. And so Nancy's asking, which specialty for SPD? You mean like who would be diagnosing that?
Okay, that's the occupational therapist who practices sensory integrative techniques. And it's abbreviated OT-SI. And not all OTs practice SI techniques. So you want to be sure, if you're just starting out, that the therapist knows what you're talking about. If she says, oh yeah, I've heard about SI and I've heard about sensory processing, you might want to try somebody else who's steeped.
Their website will be really clear that that's what they usually, if they are specialized in sensory processing, their website is very clear. We have 2 here in the Portland area. My daughter's seen 1 already, and that's their specialty. Usually they bring that to the forefront. They do other things as well, but they make sure on their website that you know that that's what they do. So it's usually pretty clear.
Yeah. Now, physical therapists and speech and language therapists, there are other therapists who also use SI techniques, and that might work. But those SI techniques are really important. And let me put in a shout out for vision therapy. I am such a proponent of that, and I think I saw that in one of the questions over here. Vision therapy is provided by a developmental or behavioral optometrist. The optometrist is an eye doctor, well-educated, credentialed eye doctor whose business is the behavior of the eyes, how the eyes work together.
Yes.
The ophthalmologist, I would not suggest you go to because they don't know about SI and SPD, and this is terrible, but you can't spell it. You can't spell ophthalmology anyway.
And I know I have a Dr. Goddard has been my go-to behavior person for the vision and everything I do with school moves, and he's been wonderful. And when you're looking for a vision therapist, you're looking for someone who's looking at the body-mind system together. You should be seeing movement as a part of what they're doing, not only just at the computer, but there should be some, if they're doing SI, along with it, there should be probably some trampolines, some balance work. You know, the whole mind-body system should be involved, and not only just a computer program. Would you agree with that, Carol? Am I speaking?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And the kind of activity that a child will do with an optometrist is walk on a balance beam or on a strip of masking tape on the floor. It doesn't even have to be raised because that's a vestibular activity in itself, just walking on the flat on the floor. Walking along a line, tossing bean bags into baskets, and listening to music through headphones all at the same time. So the child's getting vestibular, oral, and visual input. And that is what the sensory integration is. That integration is
those
bringing
senses
together, right? Rather than just isolating a visual task on a monitor. That's not doing the body.
Right.
And the body has to get into it.
Somebody in the chat room is saying, Amari, you're saying, I think that's the problem. It's harder to service students in school districts where the services fall under the child special ed identification. Support staff are few in some districts. And I guess that's why I'm all about tier 1. You know, we're talking about tiered interventions, and I'm all about what do we do for everyone? And I think that we can create sensory supportive classrooms and sensory supportive schools by just being conscious of when we're looking at developing programs, we're looking at interventions for our children. Have interventions to help all children, whether it's auditory, whether they have vision issues, whether they have, you can have your lap pets. You know, I just think, you know, have a little box or a basket in a classroom that has lap pets and has headphones and has some colored overlays and has some pencil grips. You know, you just have them available so that all children have that availability, can go get them. And I feel like if we just increase the awareness that Jennifer once said this, she's part of our leadership team, Jennifer, she actually said that, no, it's not Jennifer, it was Leanna Ray. She said, our classrooms are just one big nervous system. I love that. If you start looking at our classrooms as one big nervous system, you're going to start accommodating for that one big nervous system, you know? Okay, let's get to some questions because you have 9 questions now, Carol.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So what I can do is I click start answering, and then when you're done answering, I stop, and then people can actually go to the question and get your answer right away. So hello.
Do I see the questions? Or do you?
I don't know. Are you?
Oh, wait. Okay. Ask a question.
Yeah.
I see.
Have a child who's tactily defensive yet doesn't respond to the Wilbarger brush protocol. Now this, I didn't say this at the beginning, but we were talking, Carol and I were talking about that. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to the really technical questions like this, so you can decide if you can answer this one or not.
No, I can't. Because I don't. I mean, I think just having a lot of tactile equipment around for kids to play with, fabrics and sponges in the bathtub, and dress ups and foods. I think having a variety of things is good tactile practices. And I know that the Wilbarger's technique does seem to work with some people very well, but there isn't a lot of research on it. So I can't answer. I don't know.
I know I
can answer, but I shouldn't answer.
The thing about SPD, what you've been saying this whole time, Carol, it's small little steps. And I think as parents, we want these big answers and fast answers. I'm with you on bathing. Somebody wrote about bathing. My daughter's 21. I'm still dealing with bathing and soap gets in the water. Then she gets all upset about the soap in the water. I mean, it's, then we do a shower, and then she doesn't want the raindrops on her head. So I deal with it. We've had the therapy for sensory integration. That nervous system is amped up. So we want like these quick solutions, but they're just small little, we go, yay, small little things that we can get through. So I think sometimes instead of the big leap, take the smallest, that's what you're
right.
Sometimes the smallest step that we have to celebrate.
Keep a little notebook in your pocket too, and write down the things that work. Or write down the things that really don't work.
And if the child is old enough, start asking them as well.
Yeah.
With Shalia, I start to ask what would help. Do gloves help? Does this help? Does that help? So we've gotten, getting that input as they get older too. They have to start taking responsibility kind of for what's going on and start helping us as well. Okay, well, we'll move on since we have so many. Well, these kind of fast. And then who do you take your child to get them diagnosed with SPD? I think we talked about that, who you take your child to. We just answered that. So I think we're good on that. And then,
wait, there was one, can your child have both sensory modulation and sensory discrimination? Yes. And they can be all combinations. One very common combination, and this is to Carrie Jackso, a common one is tactile over-responsivity. That's the sensory avoider to touch sensations. And the same kid may have vestibular craving. So he is always moving. He's climbing to the top of the jungle gym where there's nothing to hold on to. He just wants to move and climb, and everything is a bookcase. The bookshelves or bookcases. So tactile over and vestibular under are a common combination. I see this. Oh, Anna writes, Dr. Kranowitz, don't call me doctor. That's very kind of you, but I'm not a doctor. I just have a master's. I'm an OT wannabe.
An honorary one should be heading your way soon.
Why more and more kids are having SPD issues these days? Well, I think it's our society. I think it's the kid's floppy physically, or the kid isn't cool and doesn't have tons of friends, and he comes home and he sits on the couch or he sits in front of the video game. I think we're exacerbating issues that the child has about working on relationships and working on motor coordination. These are such two very big issues for kids with SPD. Relationships is probably the most important. And that's why we're seeing more children depressed too. That research study I mentioned before about more device use seems to be correlated with more depression. Anyway, if you're not getting off the couch, you're not improving your brain-body connection. And also, parents are not tyrants, and they're not saying, you're not very coordinated, therefore I'm going to make you move. If a baby, for instance, is uncomfortable lying on her tummy, parents are going to pick up the squawking baby. They're not going to be cruel. Now, Deb and I know babies must have tummy time, much tummy time, And it strengthens their upper bodies. They learn to push their hands out and open their hands and get the feel of the carpet under their hands and move their heads around. We have bucket babies, or an expression is containerized kids. They're on their backs all day long when they're little. No. We need them moving. We need them crawling. Yeah. Do they put a dust bunny in their mouth every once in a while? They're not going to die. You know, they're going to get some experience that way. And I think that especially when we start with a kid who's kind of a loose and floppy baby, and let that baby be loose and floppy, that's why we're getting more SPD. Or if we can, I'm hearing myself get
We're not
excited.
not hearing it here.
You're not hearing me get excited about this?
No, I thought you said you had echo.
No, I'm
No, yeah.
wild about this topic. I think we are making our society conducive to more SPD. We have to have our kids get outside. They absolutely must be outside every day, an hour or more. They should have, elementary school kids should have no more than 2 hours of screen time a day. Doctors agree on keeping that down, and it's impossible to do that. Our kids are exposed to screen time all day long. But, nature made us to move. We are born to move. Yes. We are born to be part of a family and a clan and a tribe and a community where we go out, we hunt for food, we prepare the food, we take care of the babies, we weave the cloth. We all are physically invested in sustaining our homes and our lives. And it used to be that you were rewarded for bringing in your share of the harvest. And these days we're told if we're good or bad if we win a video game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm ready.
There, you are preaching to the choir, my dear. Okay.
Yeah.
About the child with the 5-pound bag, how did he learn to use it effectively and not throw it around? Please, can you help with tips or pointers on keeping the classroom safe for the other children around an SPD child who does not know his own strength?
Interesting. This boy was well behaved and controlled with it, and for him, that was throwing it around was not an issue. When I used bean bags with a group of 12 or 15 or 18 children, I would say to the group and then to the individual, if you're having trouble holding onto that bean bag in your own hand, I can hold it for you. And you can try it again tomorrow, or do you want to give it one more try today? And I did that often, and I remember just one little boy who handed me the beanbag. The others needed that reminder, and it wasn't fun or funny to throw the beanbag. And so I may have been lucky.
All of these interventions are based on the nervous system of your classroom. For instance, if you have a self-contained classroom and you have a lot of children with autism spectrum who melt down easily, who possibly could throw chairs, or if they have some emotional behavior issues, you aren't going to be introducing things into your classroom that could in some way be dangerous. And so that wouldn't be an option for that little boy. There'd be something else that would have to be used. I mean, so it's just using our good judgment, and sometimes some of the interventions just aren't an option because they're just not an appropriate intervention for the class we're dealing with.
Right. I think the answer, Dee, is it all depends. It depends on the kid, what the kid's self-control capabilities are. But respect that the child wants to do the right thing. And, the clown, or the kid who's set himself up as the bad boy because that's the way he gets attention, they don't want to do that. They want to conform, I think. and give them lots of chances. And one idea is fall in love with the kid that you don't like who's always throwing the beanbags. A little trick I learned because I remember saying,
Yeah.
yeah. So fall in love with him. Just convince yourself that you really love this child, because imagine if he's doing that in a classroom to the teacher, imagine what he's doing at home. And everyone's on his case all day long. And have it set up a little signal like, Jack, when I see you with your arm behind you and the beanbag in your hand and it looks like you're going to throw it, I'm going to go like this. Yank, yank, yank. And that'll be our secret symbol. Okay, it might not work with a 14-year-old, but try it with a 4-year-old.
Okay, next question. Great. Which is best physician to see for SPD? Whoa.
A developmental pediatrician. And there are not a lot of them in the world, but a developmental pediatrician gets it. So look, just as you want an OT who practices OTSI, you want a developmental pediatrician. You want a developmental optometrist who understand everything that Deb and I are talking about.
Right, the next question, what do you do with toe walking kids?
Toe walking is an SPD problem. There are lots of things. There's vestibular issues, proprioceptive, tactile. I mean, some children don't want the sensation of their whole foot touching anything, so they try to get away as much as possible. Other children don't have the muscular structure, and Deb, maybe you know more about this than I do. What you do with them is I guess you try to get them to stretch.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part is stretching.
Stretching, yeah. Go ahead, Deb, you answer.
The wall push-ups are really good, for that. It's usually a sign of, would you agree, the sign of kind of higher anxiety? In the brain, that toe walking is kind of a fight or flight, a tendon guard reflex response. So sometimes it's that reflex. So some reflex work might help, to see an OT who specializes in reflex work, or PT. Making sure that, you want to make sure there's not a physical reason for it. For instance,
right.
She had an issue. I've been treating her for gait issues, and I felt really like I wasn't doing enough for her turned in right foot. And I had to see a PT for my hypermobility joint syndrome that I've just been diagnosed with. And I actually had him take a look at Shalia. And after all these years, he said, you're not going to ever turn that foot out because her bones bowed. Her bone grew totally bent, and she'd been to so many people and nobody, and I didn't even notice this bent bone. So he said, actually, her gait was really good, but she has really tight tendons and I need to stretch, and she, she wears these little boots, and he said those are the perfect shoes for her with the little ankle boot. And so it relieved me of, all the time I'm thinking, I really need to get her this PT for this turned in situation. He said, it's the way she's built. I was like, whoa, oh my gosh. Yeah, all those years I worried about that.
Whole kid. Look at the whole kid.
Yeah.
I think that's the lesson in that story.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to look up.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah. You need fresh eyes. Sometimes you just need fresh eyes too. So next one, can you speak, let me click start answering. Can you speak about why children with SPD have learning difficulties? My 4-year-old has recently been diagnosed with SPD and is having a lot of trouble with learning letters and counting. I've been told SPD could cause this difficulty. I'm a little unclear why. I'm going, Carol, I'm going with a kaleidoscope. I'm going with the kaleidoscope answer. The child probably has some dyslexia going on along with SPD, because the SPD and the checklists look very similar sometimes.
Also, learning letters and counting starts with body awareness.
Yes, it does.
This might be your little 4-year-old might be a child who, when she's told to draw a picture of herself or put fabric pieces on a plate to make a face, she might not do that in a regular way. Like both eyes might be on one side of the plate, or she look at how she perceives herself in the world. But I mean, everything comes from our body.
There's a readiness piece too. Like sometimes that readiness piece isn't necessarily there, but and we're kind of quick to diagnose early. So I would, my one question I would ask is there language delay with this? Because if there's language delay and reversal of like spaghetti and some words that aren't quite, or everything's called a thing and not named, if you're seeing language along with the difficulty, then I think it's time to take a look at it through the eyes of something like dyslexia or some kind of a learning challenge. I mean, I don't want to label a 4-year-old right off the get-go, but sometimes there's clusters, right? So you're seeing that along with some language delays, then there might be more to the picture than just SPD.
And one more idea, be sure you have tactile items when you're talking about letters and numbers, which are abstract. So instead of talking about you're 4 years old, hold up 4 things. Look, you're 4 years old, and just you're 1, 2, 3, 4. And have, like crayons or pennies or something. And letters, I don't think 4-year-olds need to know their letters. They need to know green and blue, and they need to know leaf and blade of grass.
What we've had really good luck with too is, the deep pressure work where we have them. I don't know if people can see me or not. The question's in front of me, so if I hold my hand up, you guys, are you seeing me or are you seeing the questions? Can you tell me?
I see 3 fingers over the questions, Deb. No, over the other way, toward the center. There, I see 4. No, toward the center. Okay, you were there. Go. Okay, go to your right. Go to your right. More. Now. Okay, you went a little too far. Okay, there's your hand.
Okay, there's your. It's all I see are questions. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're doing deep pressure with their thumb, or you're doing deep pressure on them. The body learns 10 times faster than the brain and forgets 10 times slower. I say that all the time. So when they're doing their deep pressure, you're not only wiring the brain for that whole sensory system to be integrated, but they're also learning to count faster. So you do 1 through 10 on this hand. You do 11 through 20 on the next hand. You do, 21. I can have them counting to 40, squeezing up the arm, 21 to 30, 31 to 40. So if you can put some deep pressure into that counting piece, it's really powerful. I've seen, teachers will say to me, oh, it usually takes till October or till January for them to count to 40. We're getting them by October counting to 40. You can do it on the bottom of their feet, when you're going to bed at night.
Well, do you have that written down? Where is it something that parents can get from you, Deb? How to count that way?
Yeah, it's just kind of that simple. You're just doing pressure, your thumb into the palm and pushing on the children's palm, and you're squeezing up the arms. You're doing deep pressure with the child while you count. It's just
so 29 might be here, and 30 might be here.
Well, if you do you do 1 through 10 maybe on one hand, then you do 11 through 20 on the next. If they're ready, you go on. It might just be 1 through 5. It might be just 1 squeeze and 2 squeezes, when they're first starting. But you can quickly move from 1 to 10 on one hand, 11 to 20, then 21 to 30, squeezing up the arm, and 31 to 40. And if you're at home with a child, you can do squeeze on the legs, squeeze on the feet. It just, there's something about that deep pressure priming the brain for learning. I can't explain it technically what it's about, but it just seems to really speed up the learning process. Don't know. Just
Right.
my experience. Okay. Would OT intervention introduced at a child's early age, 2 to 3 years old, be able to lessen or significantly eliminate the problems resulting from sensory integration processing?
Okay, one correction there, Paulo. Sensory integration processing is what we want. That's the good thing. So what you mean to say is problems resulted from sensory processing disorder. Okay, I just wanted to be, sometimes people will say, oh, my kid has SI, or my kid has sensory processing. Well, that's great. What we don't want is SI dysfunction or sensory processing dysfunction or sensory processing disorder. All right, that's the lesson. So would OT intervention introduce a child's early age? Yes, the younger, the better. And I'm glad you're asking now. Sounds like your kid is a little preschooler. The younger, the better, because the young children's brains are plastic and malleable. And while it's true that old people can benefit from therapy, it takes longer. So the sooner the better. Early intervention is hugely helpful.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Earlier the better for all of this stuff. A 5-year-old refuses to sit on the floor. He either lies down on his back or needs a chair. How can I help and be part of the group? You'll know this one, Carol.
Each one of these questions is so great and open so many avenues where we could talk from different angles. Okay. Okay, he refuses to sit on the floor. Well, it could be that he doesn't want to sit next to somebody who might touch him unexpectedly. It could be that he's one of the kids I call loose and floppy, and sitting is very uncomfortable for him. He might slump over and need a lot of support. And that's what I'm thinking, because lying on your back, you don't need your vestibular system to work. It's not working when you're just there flat. Or he needs a chair to give him something behind him. So give him a camp seat, the foldable LL kind of thing. There's a wonderful folding chair called a how to hug. I'm just putting in a word for this terrific chair. It's made in America out of wood, and it's wood and canvas, and it folds up into a cylinder, and it's HOWDAHUG, how to hug. And the child can sit in it and rock, well, not me, I'm not supposed to move, and rock in it, and it hugs him. The slats conform to the child's body, so it's like deep pressure. Or let the child sit against a wall or against a bookcase. But his behavior is saying, I don't have the oomph to sit up. That's our goal, to get him to sit up. But if you need him to pay attention, manufacture a way for him to be able to sit up and work on the core strength in other ways.
Yeah, and some people are talking about, if you get one out, now everybody's going to want one. And so Marcia says, make sure you have more, because they're all going to,
right. That's right. So you have a bunch of them
and trade off, and just the same thing with fitness balls. Everybody's going to want one. Initially, everybody, it's like Christmas, open the presents. Everybody wants to open their presents, but then after a while, some play with them and some don't. And so what I find is those interventions, usually the children who really need it stick with it, and the ones who don't go back to sitting crisscross applesauce, and they don't really need that. So okay. Now it says yes, so we're good with that one. And sustained visual attention. What was the question? I'm not exactly sure. Sustained visual attention.
Okay. So the kid who can't maintain eye contact, or can't look at the picture and find where's Waldo. I think that might be what you're saying. So that's a sensory issue. it doesn't have to mean that the child has sensory processing disorder. I mean, you can have an auditory issue or a visual issue, and it wouldn't be SPD. SPD, I should have said earlier, is more connected to the kids who have tactile and movement issues. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So sustained visual attention. Yeah, we need our kids to be able to do that. So make sure the child is not looking at a screen a lot of time for hours of the day. More and more children are myopic.
Sorry.
More and more kids are myopic. Eye behavior is something that older people get. They become nearsighted. More and more young children are becoming nearsighted, and it's because all of their sight is near. Because they're not outside looking at the trees and looking at the horizon. So we need to get their vision exercised out there. It's wonderful that you've caught this in a child. Again, you see a lot of wonderful stuff outdoors. So get them out there. And if this visual attention is a problem in the classroom, like the child has difficulty seeing the teacher up in the front of the room and moving her eyes from that distant point to the near point of her desk and out, far point, near point. We should be able to focus and refocus rapidly. If that's hard for her, I would suggest going to visit a developmental optometrist.
All right. And on that note, I think we're pretty good. You have a think sheet that you can download. I'd like to, action. We have this interview. It's been absolutely wonderful. I have my little happy face emoji. I love you, Carol, so much. Love the work you changed lives. I'll give you this flower if I could. Oh,
I love it. That's so cute.
And so, as part of our conversations, what actions could you take to support families? Like one action that you might take to support families that who has a child with SPD. What action could you take possibly in your community? And Carol and I talked about sensory nights. Could we at gymnastic centers have sensory nights where our children can go and be able to wear headgear, headphones if they needed, or whatever, earmuffs or whatever they needed to be able to participate. Gymnastic centers are crazy places for children with SPD a lot of times, but they would really benefit from doing those gymnastics type activities. So could we possibly start some sensory gyms, sensory time in gyms? What could we do in our schools? Could we just say, hey, tier 1 for everybody, let's have these basic sensory interventions available for everybody? And then, what have you been inspired? I hope, Carol, you're very inspiring, and I hope we've inspired you to think a little bit differently about sensory processing, learn more. I've been notified that I'm overbooked we have a little exclamation point that says, we are overbooked for this. That's how many people signed up. I have a plan that I think covers 300 people or something, Carol, and people wanted to hear you that I have over the amount, but I'm thrilled. They're going to move me to the more expensive plan, but it was very worth it.
I'm honored, really, so honored.
Any final words? Get Carol's book, get the word out there, really help those teens, get them more aware of this, hopefully reduce the whole anxiety and everything we're seeing going on with our teens. Great work, Carol. Just love what you
Well, thank you. And I love these kids and I love their families because I love being able to help you open some doors and look at kids in new light and think that it's physical and that you're a wonderful parent and you're doing everything you should. And I just love.
I'm saying this as a parent, so grateful for your work, so grateful for the increased understanding in society around our children with SPD. Thank you, everyone. Our community. Are you reading all the thank yous?
Oh,
yeah, people are just really grateful for your time, Carol, and for all the work that you've done. And thank you for hanging on a little bit longer than we usually do. And as soon as we log off, it will be available as a recording. You can use it at your schools for parent night. You can send parents to this, however you want to use these recordings are available forever for you to use however you would like to benefit the cause. All right.
Fantastic.
Carol, thank you.
All
Have a
right.
wonderful rest of your evening.
Deb, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank
Be
you.
well.
Bye.
Bye.
Recordings available immediately afterwards.